Today we're together with Essie Richards, and we got a message from you saying, "Hey, it could be cool with a talk and appear on the podcast." So here you are. First of all, welcome.
Thank you. It's amazing that you said yes. Thanks for having me.
So you are in the homeschooling, unschooling world yourself. How did that came to be in your life? What happened? How long time?
Oh,
How many kids? Stuff like that.
Oh, the 200
Yeah,
questions in
yeah,
one
yeah.
question.
yeah, that's
You
good. I
start
like
young.
that.
I think you're in England, right?
Yeah, I'm in Cornwall, so rural UK, right at the bottom. It almost doesn't feel like England. It's a lot of Cornish people say, no, it's not England. So it's really beautiful and it's far enough from cities to feel like, yeah, you're in a nice bit of wilderness. It's
But
gorgeous.
it's southwest, right?
Yeah, southwest.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
just spend a lot of time in southeast and East Sussex.
Yeah,
I don't
nice.
know how different the nature is. I think it
Yeah.
could be parallel. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. I wanted to move to New Zealand, and my husband was like, no, it's too far. So Cornwall felt like a really good compromise. It's like that's the furthest point away from the middle of England. Yeah.
Stay
And
on the island.
yeah, right, just about. We started unschooling about it's about 8.5 years ago now, I think. I'm terrible with time. I've got two kids who are nearly 15 and 11 and a half. And I think, like so many people, uh, our children said, let's unschool by how school just didn't work out for our eldest. So the same story I've heard so many times, this really bright, animated, creative wild little creature who just loved everything, went to school, and we just slowly started to see that little light go out in his eyes. And he would come home, really distraught and in bits for hours. And we finally managed to understand that he was getting bullied at school by another little boy who was probably really distressed himself. And we tried to partner with the school, but the system just didn't allow for that at all. And we were like, we have no idea what we're doing. We had never met anyone who homeschooled. I thought that meant I was going to be chained to a desk for like the next 18 years of my life, but it felt like the only option at that time. So we just said, look, he's not going back. That's just the thing. And we'll just see what happens. And we had just life without school for 6 months where we were just like, let's just give him time to recover. And then I was like, this is brilliant. Why are we doing anything else? And sort of went down a bit of a rabbit hole, as you do, got on the internet,
How
looked at
old was he at the
homeschooling.
time?
How old was he? He was,
Mhm.
yeah, he was 6, just about 6. Yeah. And somehow found Pamela Riccia's podcast, read about unschooling, was like, oh my God, this is us. This is us. And yeah, that was it really.
I was just curious for how long he was in school because many countries have different definitions on when school starts. So if he came
Yeah.
out when he was 6, when did he go in?
Yeah, it starts so early here. Hey, I see the kids start school and they just look like tiny little creatures in these giant uniforms, and you're like, well, they're just babies. He started when he was 5 and he came out, yeah, like a year and a half later. I think it's about when he was, well, maybe he started when he was 4.5. I'm terrible with time, but he was there for reception, which is like pre-year one. So he did reception in year one. He came out at the end of year one. Um, and we, yeah,
So reception is usually you're 4 or 5 years old,
4 or 5. Yeah, I think he was about 4.5. Yeah, he
and
was
you
like,
call that school.
hmm, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, well, it's different here. In France, they call it school from 3 years
Yeah.
old, and here we call it school from 6. It's just
it's
definition,
different.
but it matters in the child's life. How early do we start the
Yeah,
pushing? And
yeah,
it matters in our life. When do we think it's schooling
yeah,
compared to nursery or kindergarten, which is a more
yeah.
I don't know how it is
chill
today,
thing?
but when we were young, which is some years ago,
No.
Then it was called the first class, which would be called zero today, maybe would be called the kindergarten class.
Hmm.
People talked a little about the alphabet, but most of it was just to getting into the habit of sitting down and shutting
Yeah.
up, I think.
Yeah, having a backpack, having a pencil case,
Yeah.
having a packed lunch, listening
Yeah.
to the bell. You have to go back into the classroom when the bell rings,
Yeah.
stuff like that. Yeah, so it was
Yeah.
behavior only the first year, and then the second year they started the actual schooling with
Yeah.
alphabet and math and stuff.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wanted to talk a little about bullying because you mentioned that as among the causes for why you took your son out. I've looked into the numbers from time to time, and I get saddened, disheartened, and surprised every time I see the amount of people who say they have been bullied, and then you have severe bullying, not severe bullying, but it's, and then I'm also, when I look at the number, I can't remember them right now, but whatever amount it is that has been bullied, then there's also the bully.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not nice after either.
No.
And I have been unfortunately on both sides.
Yeah.
And then if I look back at what I took part in against
Yeah.
other people, which I'm definitely not proud of, the excuses made from adults and myself or the story you spin is that it was child's play. Some of it, not
Yeah.
really mean, we didn't mean anything by it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that someone didn't went home and cry, or had a shitty day. So just the sheer amount of acceptance going on in the school where bullying is seen upon as kind of a necessary evil, or there is a limit of acceptance, like it's okay with this amount of bullying, but if it's this amount, then we try to tone it down. And I mean, I wouldn't accept that. I think it's really
Imagine.
wild.
I think we
Yeah.
read a number once where some schools, so we're from Scandinavia, not that we live in Scandinavia, but we're from Scandinavia, and Scandinavia holds this place in the world discourse on schooling to have the best schools. I think Finland is running with the star at the moment. They are doing very good. Not that I agree with schooling as such, but do we have to have schooling? They are doing better than many places. And we had some numbers running here where they did something to minimize the bullying, and it was success. And there was a lot of writing about it in the newspapers, and the government did really well, and we reduced the bullying, and now it's down to, and I might be wrong, we might have to look this up, but I think it's down to 15% of school children who are being bullied. Hey, would you accept 15% of your friends bullying you on a daily basis?
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy.
It's wait a minute, is that success?
Yeah, like that's a good
Is this where we stop and we pat ourselves on the shoulder and we think we're the best countries in the world to make schooling? Yet 15% of the kids
And
suffering.
it's
will
even
go
higher.
home with that feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really interesting to talk to Theo as he got a bit older and a bit of distance from the situation, because I mean the thing that happened that was the last straw for us, there were lots of straws, but the last straw was when he looked at me and he said, "Mum, you're just not doing your job. You're not keeping me safe. Why are you putting me there?" And I was like, that's it, basically. How can I answer that? And he about a year later, I think, he said to me, it wasn't just that the this little boy was hurting me, so he would strangle him and he'd do it in blind spots of the playground quite cleverly, obviously quite a distressed little lad. But my son Theo, he said it wasn't just that. He said it was everything. It was the way the teachers shouted at the kids, the way they had favorites, the way that there were things that were very confusing to me, why people got punished for things and some people didn't and some people did. He said I couldn't make any sense of it and it just wasn't safe, basically. The adults weren't safe. When I told people I was getting hurt by this little boy, they didn't look after me. Actually, what they did is when we said you have to do something, you have a duty of care for our child, they sat Theo on a bench, a very small part of the playground. And he said, you've got to stay there so you don't get hurt by this other little boy. He can run around the whole playground with all of your friends, but you sit here so we can keep an eye on you. So Theo was like, and so then I was punished for like this thing that was happening to me. And he said, basically what he was describing is a very messed up system that to a little boy who'd had quite a straightforward life with, a fair degree of respect, had gone into this place that just was crazy and the rules made no sense. There was no logic. It was unfair. It was unjust. He saw his friends getting hurt and cry. And, he would come home and just be like, please, I cannot go back to that. And it was so interesting to hear that from a child's mouth, like we know that. But when you see the lack of sense and how that actually impacts somebody, it's just, it's really outrageous, basically. Yeah.
What was also interesting, I think, is how we hold that idea, we the adults, because we were schooled. We rarely talked to adults who were homeschooled. So I suppose you were in school as
I
well.
was schooled, yeah.
Most of us were schooled.
Yeah.
And we hold this idea that this is a necessary evil. This is a fact of life. This is how it is. And you start when you're 3, 4, 5, 6, something. And then it's confusing in the beginning, but you figure it out. And then you spend your 10, 15, whatever. I spent 23 years in school. And then you come out and then you're educated and you need that. Yay. But we have that idea. And at what point do we wake up and realize, oh, we don't have to do that? It's a little bit like we have this idea, you sleep in a bed, right? So first time one of my friends said, yeah, I threw out my bed. I just have to take my sheepskin off the sofa and I sleep on that. And I really enjoy it. Are you crazy? And then another one, he said to me, yeah, I always do 50 push-ups before I go to bed because I have a hard time falling asleep. And then I just sleep on the floor. Otherwise my back hurts. So I use the bed just to lay out my clothes. And I thought, what? Wait. So, I mean, there are many things that are like that. We think that's how it is.
Yeah.
And the school is a big one. Now that I talk about the beds, maybe it's not such a big deal that some people choose to sleep in a different way. You can get your head around that. You might think it's a little bit crazy, but you're like, whatever. But if you take your kids out of school, everything stops.
Yeah, because we're conditioned by the school system, certainly in the UK, that if you don't, all these terrible things are going to happen. They're going to fall behind. They're not going to learn how to be amongst other people. You're building a rod for their back. Someone said that to me at the nursery that Theo went to.
You're what?
You're building a rod for your own back. Have you heard that saying before?
Like having a straight back by going to school. Okay.
Yeah.
That's how you learned it.
So you're gonna ruin your spine basically because you kind of
Well, I think it's the opposite. It makes no sense to me, but they were basically like, if you pick up Theo when he's crying from nursery and take him home, you're going to teach him that that's what will happen. And I was like, yeah, that's like really good, right? I'm sad, my mummy comes. And they were like, oh no, he's going to do that every day. And I was like, but if he wants to do that every day because he needs his mummy, then that's great that he knows how safe he is that that's going to happen. They're like, oh, well, he's just going to cry. And I was like, what? So before he even started,
right.
We were getting this sort of fear. Yeah, they're right?
They're right to the respect that you can condition the child to learn that, you're completely helpless. There's nothing you can do about your situation. So there's no point in complaining.
Yeah, no point in crying. Right, exactly. It's so back to front, right? It's crazy. And I think, and then you step outside that of construct. We didn't even believe in school. Before we started school, we were like, we don't believe in it as an institution. We don't like it. My husband and I, we worked with young people who were homeless. So they'd had terrible lives and had terrible experiences. We had both had awful experiences at school. We didn't believe in school at all, but we just didn't really understand the other options. And so we found this school that we thought, yeah, we can make this work. Maybe it's something about us. Maybe we're just a bit hippie-ish or something. Maybe we can work, we'll give it a go. And it's so hard when you actually see the things that you had already seen, but your child goes, no, it's really like this. And it caused us to really look at the things inside ourselves, like, fear of confrontation, fear of authority, fear of man. Like for our son, we got over that shit, stand up to school and be like, nah, that's not cool. But what was so interesting was how there was so much blaming of the victim, so much blaming on our parenting. This is probably your parenting. There's not really anything happening. You're probably not doing it right. You're probably being it too soft. Theo's probably a bit strange. It was really horrifying.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting subject to dive into, which is resilience and how I think a lot of people use it wrong. I think every parent out there want a child that when they come out into the world is secure, is standing on a secure foundation of knowing yourself, and that version of resilience, yes. But I mean, all this, just brush it off, you will get stronger. What doesn't kill you, hurt you. What doesn't hurt you, yeah, fuck it. Oh, is it?
What doesn't
That doesn't kill you.
Yeah. What doesn't kill you, yeah, that's how it is.
What doesn't hurt you will kill you.
Yeah, what doesn't kill you will make you stronger, but it will also hurt you. But it's not fun getting hurt. Of course, you can get stronger through it. Of course, you can grow out of bullying and take something away from it. But that's not how you make strong people. I don't believe that. I believe that's how you make people who are fencing themselves in and protecting them against the world. And that is not strength in my world. The strength should be to be able to walk into the world like you are, and yeah. And then what? How do you handle meeting people who are not nice? It's difficult because they are out there, and I take it personally sometimes, and I can get sad if people are weird around me. But I think the best we can do for our kids is let them grow up in a caring, loving atmosphere where if they say it's not fun, then don't just retort to you'll get stronger. You'll just get up on the horse again, get on, and don't cry, you're a boy, and all this stuff that was more common when we were young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because what you're doing is you're teaching kids or people to deny parts of themselves. Like, I'm really hurting right now. No, you're not. Okay, I just push that down and deny that. And you're teaching them the messages that when I'm struggling and I share that with somebody, they're not going to listen, so I just won't do that. So you're teaching them all these strange rules about connection and community and survival and, like things that you just totally have to unlearn throughout your whole adulthood if you want to have any sort of authentic connection with people, or else you're just living out of all these wounds. So many of them happen, at school. It's so interesting.
I just wanted to say that circles us back to the question, at what point is it we stop?
Yeah.
To think that this is a good thing, that this is an axiom, that this is how it has to be, that this is just part of life. We have to do that. Just like we have to sleep we need a bed, otherwise we can't sleep. We kind of need a school, otherwise our kids can't grow up. And at what point do we stop? Because we all know it hurts. We all know it sucks.
Yeah.
We all know that the stories are about how the fictive stories in the movies and the children's books, how kids hate school. We all agree with that. Everybody hates it. Most people hate it to some extent, and most people, if you talk to them, were hurt by it somehow. They will tell you these stories if you talk to them as adults that hurt, and they got hurt, and they had to work with that trauma, to get over it, to have a good life after. So my question is, I mean, I heard your story. What stopped you? Your child saying, I'm not safe. Why are you putting me there? It's your job to keep me safe. You're my mom, and I'm not safe. So that was maybe you're like stacking on other things. I get that. And because you are who you are, something stopped you. And we have a parallel story, basically. And now we have listeners to this podcast who might actually have kids in school. And the question is, when do we stop and question the root problem? When do we stop and question the everything of this child's life? Could this be different? Why are we doing this? Is it right? Is it true they need the school to grow up? Why do we go so far? Why do we put the kids there for a year and a half? Why do we put them the next day, the first time they tell us that they got bullied? Why do we take them back? That's so, I mean, it hurts to ask the question.
Yeah.
But it's strange, isn't it? If they were at a playground, let's say, and there was some rough surface somewhere, some really unsafe swing that kind of always would unhinge and they would fall into a pond and almost drown, we would never go to that playground again, and we would complain.
Yeah.
But in the school, we put them back, even though we know they get hurt. Why do we do that?
It's so complex. There's so many reasons, right? I mean, there's some people who just have to because their whole childcare is based around school and they just don't have choices. And that's really painful and really hard. And the system's created around that, right? To keep people in school so that children can go through school and be workforce ready, right? We understand that. The system is created and designed for that. And it's designed to make it very hard for people to live without it. You know, financially, it's really, really difficult to live without school. You're unsupported. If you're a single person, that's really tough. You know, if you're then on a one income, it's harder. It's harder unless you're in a fortunate position, you know, where one of you's earning quite well. So financially, it is harder to live without school, definitely. You know, we've made lots of sacrifices, which we would make over and over and over and over again. But the reality is, it is harder. And then there's conditioning. Some people are just so entrenched in, I think we were lucky because we were already, you know, had deconstructed a lot of this stuff. I'm neurodivergent, so I would always see through the system of things anyway. It didn't really make sense to me. I don't have respect for authority. I never have had it just because I'm supposed to have it. Whereas I see other people that abide by those rules of society where you're supposed to respect people in authority, and they do. That's just what they do. And it's very jarring to hear that someone's not doing that to people. And so their tolerance for school is going to be much greater than mine was, which was pretty, it was pretty small, really. I've also met quite a few people who, you know, even if they've been wounded by school and their families, they still think that it did them good. You know, they haven't kind of come to
I think
terms with
that's
that.
an interesting thing. If you do something over and over and over, then it's very difficult to stop up and say, oh, I shouldn't have done that. It is
Yeah,
very difficult not to try to make sense of the choices we have made. You could turn it around and say, as we are doing, we are making sense of the choices we have made, and is arguing that they were the right choices. And if I have had a child in school for that long time, I would argue that it was the right thing to do, and see how well it went for her and stuff like that, because it is very difficult to grow and say out stuff loud that we are sad that we have done.
yeah,
But isn't it also a good thing to look at the bright side of things?
yeah,
To focus on the positive.
yeah, of course, because you can't change what you have done. So there's We can only grow from the past.
But there's also the present.
Yeah.
Let's say we had our kids in school and it was a wobbly thing. I would still say it's a good thing to focus on the positive. It's just at some point, maybe it's not.
Yeah, at
Some
some point.
point, I'm reconditioning myself. At some point, I'm lying to myself.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have just been in England for 3 months during the fall. Wonderful long time to see and explore the country. And one of the things you get to see is this, and I will make fun of England, is like parents being like, nah, I want my kid to grow up to be individual and learn a lot. Here's a school uniform, so you look exactly like everyone else.
I know, right?
It baffled the shit out of me. I mean,
The uniform
the
is very
uniform,
hard for us to
I
understand.
don't understand it.
I don't
I don't
understand
understand that people don't scream when they put their child in a uniform and they're like, now you can be individual together with all the rest who look exactly like you.
Yeah.
Oh, how was it? If you have this aversion towards school and then putting your child in a uniform and you have been raised to be like, this is a proud moment.
Mm.
How was it to do that?
Well, it wasn't a proud moment for me at all. I've always been a little bit of had a different perspective, I guess. And, you know, I didn't like it. It didn't feel good to me even then, I felt strange about it. And I immediately felt my child had been stripped of their individuality and their choices. And even though I didn't have words for that, consent, autonomy, agency were not words in my language at that point. I felt the kind of stripping away of their ability to be able to express themselves, whether they wanted to or not. And certainly for my son, that was really important. What he wore, how he felt in those clothes, sensory wise, was really important. And there were bits of him that were kind of excited, like, oh, I've got this school uniform, and but he'd always wear like funny little socks to kind of like have his own little expression going on. And yeah, I didn't like it. It felt like putting them in a little army uniform or something. It felt very odd to me.
It makes me remind where you did a wonderful choice, but when we graduate high school in Denmark, we buy a really ugly hat no one likes to have on for more than that week after, and everybody say congratulations. And it's kind of army kind of style. And I really hated it. And I have a big ass head, so I couldn't find one that fit, and it looked really terrible at me. But at the same time, you have been told during those 3 years, oh, here, this is the hat you wear when you are proud and finished. And my wife were more, aware of herself than I was at that time.
I wanted the exam because I wanted to go to university, and that was the only reason I was in what you call high school or no, you don't call it high school in England, that's American. Anyway, we needed this preparation course. Everyone takes some version of it. I did it because I wanted to go to university, and it's the only way to get in our country. I didn't get it to get a hat.
No.
I was pretty clear on that.
Yeah.
And I got into university, so mission accomplished.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
How you said when you put your son to school, you slowly saw the light dwindle, and then he felt insecure about the bullying. How was it to take him out and see him grow in the last 8 years?
It's been
quite a ride.
Yeah, I mean, initially that first 6 months was beautiful. It was like, oh my God, we've got our boy back. It was so nice and it was so lovely. And there was, just the pressure, because it was very hard to get him to go to school as well. He was, it was painful. He'd be crying and I would just be in bits like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, this is ridiculous. This is insane. Like, this does not feel good in any which way. Yeah, so it was a big relief to not have to deal with all of that and to see him just chilled out and happy and playing. And then because we were decided to not go back to school and I wasn't going to work, we had to leave London. So that was quite a big move. And while he was at school, he had had about 3 hours in the evening, just these violent kind of outbursts where I think he was just processing all of this shit that had gone on in the day. It was terrible. We didn't know what to do. You know, we would just hold him as lovingly as we could. But I mean, he would just be saying this stuff and he'd be drawing these pictures with like people stabbing each other. And, you know, it in a way so
Horrible.
good that he could express it and get it out. But we were like, oh my God, what is happening? What is going on? And that stopped in the first 6 months, but then after we moved, it started again. And we were like, what are we doing? And at that point, I was training to be, have you heard of like hand-in-hand parenting? It's kind of like a really beautiful way to support parents when they get triggered by their parenting journey. So giving them space to sort of process their big feelings so that they can be more present for their kids when their kids are having big feelings. Really beautiful. And yeah, so I was training to be a consultant for them at the time. And luckily I got to speak to some of their people who had like, you know, been around for ages. And I was like, what is going on? What are we doing wrong? What's this all about? And they were really supportive. Looking back, what I can see had happened was that he was just really burnt out. He was just so burnt out from school trauma. But, you know, he hasn't had a diagnosis, but I suspect he was also burnt out neurodivergently as well, just by the overstimulation of being in school. And so when we moved here, we had a couple of years where he refused to do anything. He got really into gaming, which was beautiful. He began this beautiful, incredible relationship with gaming. But that was good for us because it threw us right into the pit of fear that we needed to work through, right? It was just like we didn't even have a telly before we moved to Cornwall, and now our son is like gaming 24/7, doesn't want to leave the house, only wants to eat beige food. And we were like, doing? Oh my God.
Yeah, it's a difficult one.
It was
Always.
hard. It was hard, but so good. It was, I think, I don't know, maybe I'm the sort of person that needs it to be quite extreme to push them to make them look at all of their stuff. And it certainly did that. It was really deschooling 101. But he was burnt out and he was also really upset that we'd moved here and you know we hadn't understood anything about respectful parenting. We just knew how we didn't want to do it. We were trying to clobber out a new version, but we hadn't been very great at the way that we'd moved. We'd sort of gone, oh, we're going on a great big adventure, it's going to be brilliant, instead of saying, how do you feel about this? What would that be like for you? How can we make it easier? This is the reason, you know, we didn't do any of that. We were just like, it's going to be amazing. We'll buy you a scooter and it's going to be great. Just denied his feelings. So it just added school trauma, neurodivergent burnout, total lack of autonomy and disrespect for his process. And he was just like, I'm just going to do this thing that I can control, that I can win at, that I can feel safe at, that I can choose to stop and start. And he was just like, that was it for like 2 years. So that was hard. It was pretty brutal. And then he started to kind of, you know, take steps out of that and go to like little things and meet little friends and stuff like that. And I mean, it's kind of a long journey. Our journey's a long journey because that coincided with as we deschooled. I think this happens to a lot of people. You start by deschooling sort of like this outer conditioning, don't you, around education and institutions, all that stuff, learning, parenting. And then it's like, oh, now I'm going to look at all these things within myself, all these limits, all this pain, all this stuff, why I behave like that. You learn about autonomy, consent, respect, trust. I'm like, I want to trust my kids. Oh my God, I don't trust myself. And that threw me into a really sort of deep healing crisis. So I had CPTSD, which I'd had a lot of therapy around, but I think a little bit like we were talking about with school, I'd had intense therapy, but it had got me to the point where I could function and that was good enough in the eyes of the NHS. And I thought that was as good as it got. So I was just like, this is as good as it gets. I better just like do what I can with this. But then we entered this beautiful, authentic, deep journey into deschooling. And I was just like, this isn't as good as it can get. Like, I need to understand and experience all these things for myself. So I started a journey of somatic experiencing therapy, which was quite brutal with young children. And it wasn't really a chosen thing. It was kind of something I had to do in order to continue, you know, living, really. It got to that point. So Theo now had to see his mama go through, you know, 2 years
Not,
of intense
not good
pain.
necessarily, no, no.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think
So
it's
said a
really
lot.
difficult growing up, Essie, as a person. And I mean, it was somehow easier to just have your kids in kindergarten and you go to work and then someone else have decided what is good. And I think there is for me, I think it's very difficult because there is you start questioning everything, period. And I went through, oh, but everything is wrong with the society, but also like I love the society. And then you start going into oh, should I work on myself? And no, it shouldn't. It was, I'm like, where do I stop?
Yeah,
No, but there's also like the base of just getting life to run. You don't
yeah.
need to, I don't, in Danish we would call it poking your navel. I don't know if you have the same expression in English.
I think it's interesting what you said about like, you know, you couldn't afford to navel gaze and I think that is true, but I think some people can't afford not to. Like that was my experience. I couldn't afford not to like do that. I wanted to be here for my kids. I wanted to like not pretend to have relationships that were superficial, you know, superficially I could manage to hear, but underneath I'm like suffering. I was like, I want the real thing. Like, you know, geez, like I'm not going to pretend. And so I couldn't afford not to do that work. I didn't particularly want to, but and I think I've seen that with a lot of people that I think maybe unschooling is quite attractive. It sort of magnetizes people who want authenticity, who are sick of like the superficiality of stuff and the lack of community and the lack of understanding what it really feels like to be in their bodies and in connection with people. I think it really attracts people like that, who are willing to do that. I think it's quite brave work, you know, unschooling. I don't think it's for the faint-hearted, you know, you've got to really be prepared to take stuff apart and really look at it and think, do I want that? Or if not, how am I going to move through all that stuff to get to the other side? I don't know, has that been your experience?
It clearly unravels a lot of stuff. I feel like we were pretty radical before, but of course this was taking it to what most people would say the extreme level. I'm just wondering if it has to be like that. I don't really know. I can talk from my perspective and the people I met, and there are just some people who don't really take no for an answer, who don't really, if someone says to you that is how it is, they're like, but does it have to be like that? Or are you sure? Or is it
Yeah.
always like that? Do I have to live with that? Who are more ambitious on a personal level, who just will not like accept the cap and say, why did you put a cap there? What if I want more or less? Who also take, you know, they're not like just functioning in their, who will always try to do a little bit better or explore and try to do something new. There are some people who like to do what they always did and cook the potatoes exactly like grandmother did. And, you know, but there are people who enjoy that, I think. I'm just not like that. And I don't have any friends who are like that. And my husband is very much not like that. So yes, it attracts people like you described, but it also attracts, I think, people who are or maybe at least it feeds that part of your personality that really wants to question things and that really wants to be ambitious and that can always come up with the question, could we do this a little bit better? Could we do this a little bit in a more fun way, in a more beautiful way, in a more efficient way? And of course, you're right. First, we do the deconstruction of the world around us, and a lot of new unschoolers have a lot of social critique and critique about the society, and they talk about the history of schooling, and we go back to Germany and the Volksschule, all these things. And I've done that. I still do it sometimes, and it's fine. And then you take it to the other level where it's, oh, but what about my life, my family, my culture, my local community? What happened in me, and how do I arrive at the authentic point of view? Can I question my own way I function? And I think your rant started at a point of, and we've talked about that many times, how, yeah, but we also have to stop at some point. We also have to just cook the potatoes, take out the Hoover, call grandma, take out the trash, make the money, pay the insurance, move on, watch the movie. Sometimes it's not a process. Sometimes it's just life. And sometimes we just need to get things done and we need to get over ourselves. And it's not about me, it's actually about changing that diaper, washing those clothes, brushing the teeth, doing the things. My point is, there is a practical level to being a parent and to being an unschooling parent as well. And sometimes just do the work. I think that's where you like, I have to go out and make some money. I have to, I have my end of things I have to do, and suck it up and do it.
What I actually think could be fun was to turn back time, clone me, and see one guy not going on as an unschooling parent, and then the other going as an unschooling parent, and then seeing how different would I have been. Because
like the sliding doors.
Because in reality, maybe all these experiences I'm going through, and maybe I praise unschooling and the choosing of not school more than it needs. Maybe it's just part of becoming 50 and being a parent, and you learn by being a parent. So I maybe would I have been different?
Maybe you've got a bit beyond. I certainly feel like now unschooling isn't something we do. I don't even really think about it or talk about it really. It's sort of like just a way of being. Like actually Theo has now chosen to go to school, but we're still unschooling. Like that hasn't changed anything, whatever they do. It's really more about the way we relate to people. And I think that's the luxury of being a little bit further along, like being 50, having maybe older kids. You've done like that really hardcore work, right? And you don't have to think about it so much. But I think there's a time where you have to think about it a lot to wrap your little head around what is this we're doing, it takes a lot.
But I think in our lives, the life we share, it's also a question of it changes. So of course, unschooling took center stage when that was the new thing, the new shiny object. And we had to like wrap our heads around what are we doing? And it took some time. And I still sometimes have to stop and think about what are we doing in these regions. They will always be relevant. Obviously, we don't get up in the morning and not go to school. That's not what we're doing. It hasn't been for more than 10 years. It's not a thing any longer. We talk about it on the podcast, talk about when we meet new people, but we don't think about it that much. Obviously, I think that's a few years down the line, you stop thinking about it. But then it's other things. Then we move on. Then we start questioning other things. We start questioning, oh, do we have to live in a house?
Yeah.
Do we have to live in the same place? Is a university degree something you have to take on a university? Do we have to eat like this? Do we have to, do I have to feel this way? it changes, but the base idea of the questioning and the, I want to say ambition, I don't know if it's the right word actually, but this, pushing this, I'm not settling. I will always try to do it a little bit better. It can annoy my children and potentially my husband. Could we do a little more? Could we do it a little faster? Could we do it a little better?
Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful balance between wanting to push life and get the most out of it without being unsatisfied with what you achieve. That's a wonderful balance that I think we have learned to master. And I still question myself, oh, if I push for this and I want this thing over here, do I remember to be grateful from where I am?
Yeah.
But I know if I'm not pushing, I would maybe go into like a stalemate of just
Catharsis, yeah.
routine. And there's a graffiti artist in Denmark, and he have made like with big ass white letters on a wall. In the translation, it's anxiety marinated everyday routines. Big letters on the whole wall. And I love it because that is what terrifies me, to make everyday routines based on a deep fear in my life of I need to do it like this, otherwise stuff will break. I won't be satisfied. I love that graffiti artist. I want to hunt him down and interview him at some point.
Probably.
I think like that thing though, I think once you've deconstructed something, whether it's education or faith or race or whatever, you have this sort of blueprint, don't you? And then you seem to just, certainly it's been my experience, like then I seem to approach everything with that posture of like curiosity and wanting to look at it from every angle and just be like, oh, maybe there's a different way if that doesn't feel great or doesn't work for people. Or and I love that. I love it doesn't have to be that way if it's not working. Like I was gonna say before when we were talking about school, so I have an agile learning center, which is it's really interesting because we set it up for unschoolers, right? To build community for unschoolers. We're in rural Cornwall. There's not a whole lot of unschoolers. So I was like, perfect, we'll do this. And that'll be a way of meeting people. And actually, the majority of people there are kids that are unable to thrive in school. So their parents have got to a breaking point and their children just can't go anymore. And I'd say pretty much everyone at Luna is neurodivergent if they've got a diagnosis or they're in the process of it. So there's that element that the school environment really doesn't work for most neurodivergent children. So they're like the canary in the coal mine, they're the first to like go, no. And so they end up at Luna. And that's really interesting to me because over the last 2 years, I've seen parents battling for support, financial support from the local authority to look after their kids, to get what they need and stuff. And often they have to go to tribunal to fight for it and things like this. The local authority now are seeing these kids leaving school in droves, like they just can't deny it. It's not the odd one. I think it's got worse since COVID because people realized, oh, actually, maybe life without school isn't so bad, right? But instead of school saying, well, kind of what they have done, the local authorities said, Luna seems to be providing support to these kids. They made us go through this quite laborious process and they pay a higher rate for kids to come. So they've sort of said it's an alternative provision. It's certified in alternative provision. But instead of saying, the government now saying, oh, wow, school really isn't working for a lot of children. A lot of children seem to be leaving. What do we need to do to make us better? Maybe we could get the kids and the parents together, the teachers together, and make some changes so that this environment help the children to thrive. No, they don't do that because they don't have a root of love and care. They have a root of fear and control. So the only thing that they know how to do is to control people and fear and make everything fear induced. So what they're doing now is they're saying, oh my God, all these kids are leaving. What are we going to do? How are we going to get them back in? Or we're going to bring out a new bill and make places like Luna impossible and illegal So they can't exist. And then those kids will have to go back to school. We're so clever, you know, yay.
Has the bill been approved? I know our friend Randall is fighting a good fight
Yeah, it's
against it.
a lot of people are fighting it at the moment, and places like Luna, there's a lot of places like Luna, the Agile Learning Center, writing in, you know,
Yeah.
with evidence, but
Has it been approved or not yet?
no, not yet.
No,
No,
no.
no.
Yeah, but it is the challenge that a lot of places face. And I mean, there's countries where it's even
It's
illegal.
illegal,
But what
right?
I like is to take inspiration from our talk we had recently with Peter Gray, who say they're up to around 8% now that is being homeschooled. And as that is growing, then everyone knows someone who is homeschooled. And then there is this point where the tipping point where
Yeah.
it is not strange, it is not weird. Everyone have seen someone do it, so the choice will be easier. And
Yeah.
I'm not fearful for the future because I live in this focus of sharing the information and helping to get closer to the tipping point. When we
Yeah.
started in Denmark, we were around 10 families maybe, and now there's hundreds. In Denmark,
Yeah.
it's still below 1%, I presume, but we are getting there, we're pushing, and then the world will follow, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, you have to keep imagining, right? You have to keep reimagining. And like the thing you were talking about, like, you know, be grateful and not just sort of like be complacent. So keep moving forward, but be grateful for where it is. And I think, yeah, we need to get really informed by what is going on, but keep reimagining like what it can be and see the ridiculousness of and the futility of that way of being. It's just not, you know, it's
No.
not going to last. It can't, like, you know, it can't. It's just getting more and more crazy.
Well, maybe the good part about that bill pushing everyone back into the school system will be that it will be so much clearer that it doesn't work.
Mm.
You
Yeah.
know, because if you have all these little loopholes, these little ways of solving the problem, the canary, everyone else have to survive being in the mines.
Yeah.
Whereas if the canaries just keep dying in there, and I suffer for all the kids who have to go to school every day, I don't think it's a good thing. But if we are looking at the bright side, then maybe that will be what makes it fall apart, what makes people take their kids out of school. And I totally, and I mean, if it's enough kids, then our society at some point will have to come up with something, I suppose, to provide for those who are not in school. At some point, the libraries will change and be more learning center-ish, maybe. We have structures for this. We have museums, we have libraries, we have sports facilities with a lot of space and options for everyone, including children who do not spend their days in schools. And lots of these are owned by local governments. So this could change and become something that is, I mean, our kids have been ice skating while we've been in Denmark in a professional ice skating ring where, you know, they play the ice hockey and stuff like that. They do the dances. But from 12 to 3:30 every day, it's open for the public. But who's that?
Yeah.
Who is it? Who is actually free to ice skate because it's only weekdays?
Yeah.
As it is open for the public, there is a facility for homeschoolers now, which is in our little country amazing. And what I'm trying to say is maybe we don't need all the individual kids to have their or not have their or have to fight for their diagnosis, and every private individual family say, oh, I lost my income, you have to help me. Maybe we have to set up a whole society that's ready for families for whatever reason. We don't have to be victims to choose to homeschool. That we don't have to have anything wrong, quote unquote, with us to choose to homeschool. We just choose this. And our society is ready for it because we have, and we do have, we live in fairly rich countries. We do have a library we can go to. I mean, it's not like it's not there. And in our country, it's still free. So there are some things. and maybe pushing the kids back into the schools, pushing the families to take the kids out of the schools, but holding on to the responsibility at home. Now it's my problem, quote unquote. If we get to a tipping point, enough families doing this will change the society instead, which I think is better. I mean, I'm not against your Agile Learning Center, obviously, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's way better.
to-
It's more accessible, it's more available, it's just
It's
normal.
already there.
Normal, right? It's just normal. That's the thing. It's because people always say, oh my gosh, it's so amazing, this environment, what it's doing for the children. And we're like, it's not really like we're doing anything, right? We're just being normal, what our new normal is. And that's just like the basic. For me, it doesn't feel that amazing actually, because we don't have a whole lot of capacity and resources to really make it amazing. But the basics feels amazing because comparatively, when you have an environment full of consent and respect and trust and self-direction, comparatively that feels amazing. But I can see that will become the new normal because, like you say, more and more people are hearing about it and understanding it. And I meet more and more families. I find this so exciting that didn't have to go to a crisis point to then go, oh, there's unschooling. They're like, hang on a minute. We're already respectfully parenting. School just does not align with our values. What should we do? Oh, we're going to unschool. And they don't even get to that point. So already these are, like people that I meet in the unschooling community that I host, they're like in their 30s and they're only like 20 years younger than me, but they're way ahead of the game, like, and I'm like, yes, what's the next? Like, and all our kids, they're not going to have to wade through this shit. It's already creating a new normal, isn't it?
It's unlikely we will have grandchildren in the school
cool.
system.
And I think that is a wonderful place to start. I think that what you're doing, what we're doing, what a lot of people before us have done is sharing about the opportunity of choosing something else, of going down the path of what feels right for us. And I think we should all just share it with the world so more could be inspired. There's a small quote from a guy called Ross Jackson I've worked together with, who have been in the eco-village movement for 40 plus years. And he's like 83 now. He said when he looks back at all the eco-villages out there, the ones that survived was the ones that didn't fought against, but fought for something. And that is what I'm trying to do. In the start, I was against everything because I was like, needed a mental crutch to step out of the everyday norm. But now I stand for something, and hopefully more can choose this way. So thanks a lot for your time. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been lovely to meet you guys. You're doing great things. Thank you.
Well, likewise. It's been fun.